Psychological torment was nothing new to him. Being surrounded and torn apart by idiots had become routine. The bald man and his accomplice lost control and went on the attack. They mocked his face as it trembled in fear. The boy, trying to be nice, begged Snake for more time to raise the money, but the executioner didn't listen, crushed his cigarette in anger, and ignored the plea. He remembered having talked to her about it days earlier. It was bizarre to see her audacity in stiffing him. In the middle of the conversation, the green-eyed guy let slip that he had blown every last cent on a new device, a top-of-the-line smartphone. The group burst out laughing at the absurdity. Parnasha had no sense of priorities. He spent everything because of a girl who, after getting into college, took off with the phone. The group couldn't handle the joke. The bullies surrounded the protagonist and laughed in his face. Song Yahya, despite being a student at the prestigious High University of Genetics, could only lower his head and hold back tears. That place played in a different league. Anyone who stepped in there was meant to become a war machine. The world changed when spiritual energy awakened, and the Kunlun seal merged with the planet, granting intelligence to animals and turning everything upside down. Ancient beasts emerged, and technology had to fight not to disappear. Humanity avoided extinction only thanks to the war god who slaughtered the monsters. While chaos reigned, scientists searched for the key to evolution. It was the genetic mystery to break human limits. Those who became warriors ruled everything: money, prestige, authority. But the funnel was narrow. Only 1 in 100 had the DNA needed to shine. The long-haired guy, another member of the gang, taunted him by asking about his college application. He knew the dream of becoming a warrior still burned inside, despite the failures. The boy had already been rejected 3 times in the tests. The attackers, armed with iron bars, made a hellish noise until someone approached. The hero looked back, and the mood turned heavy. There was Yayi, holding hands with another guy, in full romance mode. The hero, who had always been crazy about her, was stunned. The blonde felt disgust at seeing him in that pathetic state and looked away. The light in the boy's eyes vanished instantly. Her current boyfriend, sensing the tension, asked who that broken-down guy was and whether they knew each other. The thugs kept up the siege, playing with their weapons to intimidate. Yayi turned her face sharply and told her boyfriend he was just an acquaintance of long ago, nothing more. The poor hero lit up when he saw her. It had been a month since they'd crossed paths, and in pure innocence, he asked how she was doing. The girl let go of her boyfriend's arm and walked over to the boy sprawled on the ground. She knew exactly what she was doing. With a cold, empty look, she stared into his eyes. Yayi leaned in and spit out the truth. They lived in different worlds, and he would never have a chance. She told him to stop fooling himself. The boy's heart raced, but only from pain. He wasn't seeking romance, he just wanted the respect of a friendship, but received humiliation instead. She laughed at his misery without a shred of remorse, radiating arrogance. She felt superior in every pore. The bald guy tried to interfere, but one deadly look from her shut him up instantly. Arms crossed and a look of disgust, she made it clear that pathetic boy would never be a warrior and would never crawl out of the mud. To her, he needed to accept that he was born to be a loser. Out of nowhere, she reached into her pocket and threw the phone he had given her to the ground. It had been a reward for getting into college, but now it was trash. The blonde laughed along with the thugs and pulled her boyfriend away to get out of there as fast as possible. They left, abandoning the hero behind, sighing in pain as he picked the device up from the ground. One of the cowards took advantage of his lowered guard and smashed a brutal blow into his head, laughing at the scene. The gang laughed themselves sick at the boy's illusion about the beauty. The bald man and his accomplice, armed with iron bars, demanded more money. The hero couldn't understand why they still chased him, since he had paid everything. The brown-eyed guy sneered, saying they robbed him simply because he was an easy target. Laughter echoed and tears of humiliation streamed down. One attacker suggested finishing off the trash and disappearing, but in a snap of fury, the protagonist delivered a brutal kick to the blonde's stomach, sending him flying into the wall and knocking him out cold when his head slammed. Snake was consumed by rage and ordered the gang to butcher the boy. The hero stood up with a look of confidence no one there had ever seen. He chose not to back down, but willpower didn't beat brute force. After being beaten to a pulp, the bald man delivered the ultimatum. He had only 3 days to come up with the money. The boy lay sprawled on the asphalt, struggling to breathe and staring at the sky as the cowards walked away laughing. Alone, he slowly came to and gathered what was left of his things. Still on the ground, he stared at the glow of the stars, trying to piece together the fragments of his dignity. With great effort, the boy got to his feet and, staggering like a drunk, tried to shake off the dizziness. Hatred burned in his veins. He swore with every drop of blood he had left that each of those wretches would pay dearly for what they'd done. He steadied himself and dragged his way toward his shack. Halfway there, a familiar voice cut through the silence. It was his friend, skipping along, bursting with news. Luo forced an energy he didn't have to pay attention to her. The girl started talking with a grin from ear to ear, but froze in shock. When her eyes landed on the cuts and bruises all over his body, panic took over. Heavy tears rolled down the brunette's face as she broke down crying right there. Desperate, the boy tried to stop her from crying, assuring her it was nothing serious. She was panicking, feeling his pain as if it were her own. Luo, trying to play the hero, patted his own chest and forced a calm expression. His face twitched with pain for a moment, but he made up some excuse for the injuries, and the girl ended up believing him. She stared at him, wiping her tears with her sleeve, then spun on her heels and sprinted off. She shouted for him not to move and came back in a blur with a first aid kit. With all the care in the world, she cleaned his wounds with medicated cotton. In a few minutes, the damage was taken care of. Where the cuts were worse, she put on bandages. To break the heavy mood, he squeezed her nose and called her a crybaby. Shin stepped back, trying to compose herself, and dropped a line. She said doctors recommend crying to lose weight and improve health. Luo burst out laughing and, pinching her cheek, said she didn't need any of that. The kindness was so straightforward that the girl blushed and looked away. Tangle brought back memories of the times he stuffed her with fresh bread just to watch her gain a little weight. Laughing, he finally asked what the big news was. Beaming, his friend spilled it. She had just been accepted into High University of Genetics. Luo almost fell over from happiness for her. Shin, full of hope, wished that her friend's name would be on the acceptance list too. That was when the weight of failure hit him. He remembered he'd been rejected again. Not wanting to ruin the moment or make her suffer for him, Luo swallowed hard and lied. He pretended the game was still on, saying the official results would only come out the next day. Immediately, the girl grabbed his shoulders tightly. She decided to cheer him on, convinced his name would be among those accepted. Luo gave a strange smile and brushed it off, swallowing the bitter truth to keep the mood intact. After that quick exchange, he dragged himself home. As he climbed the steps, it felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He was at rock bottom, questioning whether he would ever live up to his word. To him, it was obvious no college would want a guy with such mediocre DNA. The moment he turned the key in the door, a strange man appeared out of nowhere and crashed into him. They both hit the ground in shock. Luo yelled and desperately tried to pull away, thinking it was a robbery, but the intruder grabbed his leg and begged him not to call the police, saying if they made any noise, his enemies would find him. Completely confused, the hero froze. He needed to catch his breath, turn on the light, and lock the door before anything else. After making sure no one would see the scene, he approached the stranger. The man, wearing glasses, opened his eyes with difficulty and got straight to the point. He didn't have much time left to live. His first question hit like a punch to the gut. Do you want to be a warrior? Without waiting for an answer, he reached into his lab coat and pulled out a sinister vial. He explained it was an experimental genetic drug made from ancient formulas capable of changing Luo's destiny. The problem was the risk. The doctor admitted the science behind it was so ancient that the effects were a complete mystery. The chance of death was enormous. He gripped Luo tightly, begging him not to let that secret fall into the wrong hands. If he chose not to use the syringe, there was only one order: destroy everything. As the boy tried to process the madness, something bizarre happened. The stranger's body began to combust. In seconds, the man with glasses was swallowed by intense flames. A minute later, only ashes remained on the floor. The protagonist stood in shock, frozen, eyes fixed on the syringe left behind. After so much chaos in a single day, he needed air. He went out onto the balcony to clear his head, but the thought of the drug wouldn't leave his mind. It was an emotional whirlwind. He took a deep breath, staring at the horizon, trying to process that his life could change right there. If it worked, he would be noble, powerful, and reach the top. It was all or nothing. Determined, the dark-haired boy marched to his room. Without hesitation, he drove the needle into his arm and injected every last drop. In the next instant, the world spun. A bizarre sensation took over, and the ground seemed to vanish beneath his feet. The kid collapsed, knocked out by the drug, and lay there for hours on end. Time flew by, and morning came. Sunlight filled the room and birds chirped outside, but only then, after that deep blackout, did he begin to come back to himself. Luo slowly regained consciousness. He was drenched in sweat and felt an infernal heat burning inside. When he finally managed to stand, his first instinct was to check himself over. The relief was overwhelming. He was alive. Since he hadn't kicked the bucket, the crazy plan to inject that mysterious substance had worked. It had been a suicidal gamble to turn things around, but he was ecstatic, even letting out a nervous laugh of pure euphoria. The trance was broken by the shrill sound of the alarm clock on the wall. He straightened his clothes, thinking it was still early, but the shock came right after. He had slept the entire day away. It was the day the results were announced and the final exam. Panic hit hard. The first thing that came to mind was his friend. His phone was flooded with messages from her. If she found out he'd vanished, all hell would break loose. Nervous, he turned the device off and rushed to the bathroom. Even in chaos, he didn't give up on basic hygiene. Luo brushed his teeth and washed his face in a rush, trying to calm his racing heart. When he finally stopped to look at himself in the mirror, the shock was massive. He froze as if he'd been punched. The medicine had transformed him. His hair now shone in an intense silver hue. During a quick shower, it still didn't fully sink in, but once he stepped out, the change in his body was undeniable. He felt an absurd strength coursing through his veins. The boy had become someone else. With no time to waste, he marched to the door. Every step and every glance overflowed with a confidence he had never had in his life. He was itching to run into the cowards who had humiliated him. Before long, he reached the site, which was packed with people. He swept the crowd with his eyes, focused on a single person, his friend. She soon appeared with a huge smile. Luo was tense because of her, since she looked worn down and had also arrived late for the big event. Their conversation, which had been going smoothly, was cut short by Snake's disgusting laugh. The bald man showed up already demanding the money again, full of swagger. The hero didn't think twice and stepped forward to face the gang. The bald man's lackey also moved in with bad intentions. The guy started sizing the girl up with a filthy look, but Luo positioned himself like a human shield in front of her. He wasn't going to let anyone lay a finger on her. Snake didn't like that insolence at all and scowled, ready to strike. When the situation was about to explode into violence, his friend also tried to intervene to protect him. At that exact moment, a figure appeared above them. A tall, red-haired man came flying down from an elevated platform toward the group. He swept the crowd with an icy stare. He was there to deliver the final verdict and made it clear anyone who didn't belong should leave quietly or he would clear the place himself. Instantly, the attackers' bravado vanished and they backed off, intimidated by the redhead. But the bald man, arrogant as ever, stepped close to the hero and snarled that he wouldn't leave until he heard the names. Shin, green-eyed and furious, stepped in front of Luo, determined to be his shield against that scum. Luo gave a faint smile and calmly touched her hair. He knew she wanted to protect him, but made it clear that no one can carry another person's world on their shoulders forever. Even so, the brunette didn't budge. She was ready for whatever came next. Suddenly, Shin spotted Yaya and ran toward her, overflowing with joy. The blonde had secured her spot long ago through under-the-table means. The two greeted each other, but the mood soured fast. Shin held her friend's hands, admiring her success, but Yaya frowned in disgust. With an air of superiority, she snapped a cold "enough."
She told Shin to stop hanging around the hero, claiming he was dead weight and that being seen with him was an absolute embarrassment. Shin didn't understand, thinking they'd had some petty argument, but the truth was worse. Yaya confessed without a shred of remorse that she had used the idiot and that now they belonged to different worlds. Shin tried to argue, saying the official results weren't even out yet, but the blonde was cruel. She had already seen the leaks. Luo's name was crossed out as a total failure. She didn't want to be contaminated by his defeat. Shin lowered her head, devastated. She clearly remembered when the boy had put his own on the line to protect her in the past. To her, character mattered more than any score.
Feeling the weight of her friend's betrayal, Shin turned her back on Yahia. The blonde tried to follow, but the green-eyed girl turned with contempt and told her to disappear from her life once and for all. As the argument ended, the redhead began the official announcement. Huang was the first to be kicked out, 0 across the board. Then came the name of our hero. Luo clenched his fists, already bracing for the blow. The verdict came flat. He passed the theory and physical tests, but his DNA was deemed trash. Failed. Without hesitation and with a confidence no one expected, the silver-haired boy stepped forward. In front of everyone, he demanded the right to retake the genetic test. The gang of cowards who had beaten him the day before couldn't believe the audacity. The crowd burst into laughter, thinking the hero had lost his mind. Yahia and her friend just watched that madman dig his own grave. The risk was insane. If he failed, the debt of 200,000 would send him straight to prison. The announcer fell silent, thought for a moment, and against all expectations, decided to give in and grant the chance. The redhead pulled out a strange device that emitted a sharp noise when activated. With an impressive leap from above, the man landed in front of the boy. Without wasting time, he ordered him to place his hand on the panel for DNA collection, but left a warning. If he failed again, the consequences would be fatal. Luo took a deep breath and placed his hand on the screen, focused on what was to come. Suddenly, reality itself seemed to tear open, and a bizarre space unfolded around them, expanding without end. The girls were in shock. They had been through this before, but their energy traces were tiny compared to what was happening there. The phenomenon was colossal. The crowd watched with jaws dropped. Someone commented that not even the genes of the greatest warriors in history had ever shone like that. Even the judge lost his composure and, unable to believe his eyes, demanded a second test. Luo, wearing the smile of someone who knew the tables had turned, repeated the process. The supervisor checked the data, stunned. The machine was flawless. The boy himself was the phenomenon. Luo looked at the man and with complete calm asked what the next step was. The redhead cleared his throat, still processing the information, and dropped the bomb. Luo's genetic strength exceeded 400%. He was in. The first to celebrate was his loyal friend, who flew into his arms in a tight embrace. While people were still trying to understand what had just happened, Luo smiled, but his eyes were already fixed on another target, the gang of thugs who had made his life hell. The celebratory mood gave way to a heavy tension. He stared at the bully's leader and asked in a deadly tone what the amount of the debt was. The man, shaking with fear, stammered that there was no need for anything else, that the debt was paid. Luo only gave a cold smile, and the weight of his presence was so overwhelming that the aggressor lost all strength. The baton slipped from the thug's hand as he collapsed to the ground, eyes full of tears, legs trembling. The coward crawled to the hero's feet, begging forgiveness for every insult. Seeing their boss humiliated, the rest of the gang did the same. The girls nearby began whispering, thinking Luo was being too cruel. The hero found himself in a dilemma. Would repaying evil with good bring any real return? Looking around, he saw judgment in the eyes of the other youths, who were already staring at him with contempt. He remembered when he had been the weakest link. No one would have lifted a finger to help him back then. The silence became suffocating until, finally, he walked decisively toward the fallen bully. He lunged at the redhead and planted a sharp kick square in his face. Next on the list was Snake. With speed that defied sight, Luo clamped the bald man's head. Seeing the lethal precision of the boy's movements, the thug began to tremble, sensing death's shadow nearby. Mercy was nowhere to be found.
With the hatred of all the accumulated humiliations, Luo slammed him into the asphalt with monstrous force. Knowing that piece of trash could take more, he didn't stop, unleashing a brutal sequence of blows. The rest of the gang lay frozen on the ground, paralyzed by terror, too afraid to react and draw attention to themselves. Seeing the end approaching, Snake broke down in tears and begged for his life. The hero, eyes icy, delivered the verdict. He would break the man's arms, but let him keep breathing. That was the price of his cowardice. At that moment, Shin ran up to him, radiant, showering him in praise. He was unstoppable. The crowd that had once despised him now watched in absolute silence, hypnotized by the display of power. Yaya and her friend were also stunned, unable to believe the transformation. Deep down, the traitorous blonde felt a flicker of hope, thinking he might forgive her and crawl back to her. But Luo didn't even bother to look at her. He simply turned his back and walked away with his true ally. The judge, taking it all in from afar, smiled in satisfaction. He knew that warrior was going to soar high. 3 days passed, and the group gathered at the designated location. The announcer, now acting as an instructor, began laying out the truth about genetic power and how it determines who commands and who obeys on the battlefield. The lecture made it clear that even those who started with low indicators could evolve as they grew stronger. The kids were glued to every word. The redhead was thrilled by their interest and laid it out plainly. Beyond brutal training, the essence of animals and rare plants would be essential to upgrade their abilities. He mentioned energy weapons and cutting-edge equipment, things they would only gain access to as they leveled up. The class shifted to the hierarchy of warriors, detailing each rank and sub-rank. The students' eyes shone with the promise of power.
A month flew by, and the progress was obvious. Training with combat robots was in full swing, and Luo was already the absolute standout. He was the first to jump into training, under the admiring gaze of his friend, who tried to keep up with the flawless fighting style of the new prodigy. The big friend commented that he felt he was about to evolve. Luo heard him and agreed, but there was no time for small talk. The fight was raging, and danger didn't wait. The opponent went on the offensive. Luo tried to arm himself, but out of nowhere, his heart started pounding like a jackhammer. His chest felt like it was about to explode, freezing his reflexes and making his muscles tremble. He barely managed to raise his arms for a desperate block at the last second. Unable to counter because of that bizarre sensation, he was thrown back and slammed hard into the wall. The impact was sharp. He sprang back up, trying to get his bearings, but the enemy was already charging at full speed. His friend panicked, but there was nothing he could do. Then, in a split second, Luo tracked his opponent's punch with supernatural vision. He found the opening. The robot froze in midair for a few moments and vanished from the field. The partner rushed over to check the damage, but Luo was hit by a thermal surge of energy. It was as if a hydroelectric plant had been switched on inside him. Seeing the shock on his friend's face, Fatsu understood immediately. Luo had broken his chains and awakened a new tier of genetic power. The pressure he radiated was absurd. The boy had jumped 2 levels at once. Still not fully believing it, Luo accessed the system to confirm the insanity. He needed real tests, so he calibrated the opponents to maximum level. The moment the machines appeared, he became a human projectile. With a surgical strike, the first robot was smashed into the concrete before it even hit the ground. His friend was left in shock by the violence and speed. On the system panel, the notification glowed. He had reached warrior level with a surreal 700% genetic strength. For comparison, the elite among ordinary students barely scraped past 200%. Luo let out a deep breath, but his hunger for power spoke louder. He wanted more. The chubby guy commented that the top student in their class had leveled up the day before and hadn't come anywhere close to that performance. Training ended and the two packed up. On the way home, they stopped to fill their stomachs after a brutal day.
Luo couldn't get his evolution out of his head. It was bizarre to have doubled his power in minutes. When he got to his room, he threw himself onto the bed and stared at his phone, lost in thought. It finally sunk in. He wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was unique. He was the only one who had come alive from that madness. The first thing that popped up on his phone was a breakfast invitation from his friend. They exchanged a few messages, and shortly after, the hero was already out the door, slamming it shut and heading to meet her.
To his surprise, Adenora Street was still buzzing with people. Shinja was there, planted near the main entrance, devouring a snack with enthusiasm. When she heard his footsteps, the girl forgot to chew and ran toward him like a maniac. The brunette nearly choked in the process, starting to cough and pound her own chest. Luo burst out laughing, reminding her that he had warned her 1,000 times to eat slowly, even bringing up a few embarrassing moments from her childhood. After the scare, she finally caught her breath. That was when Shin noticed the change. The hero had leveled up, both in rank and status. A slight discomfort hit her, but she congratulated him and asked about the big news. With a victorious smile, she said she had sent him a gift to look over. Luo checked his device and came across a technique called wind steps. He was puzzled by where it came from, but she brushed it off with a mysterious smile. After he pressed her, she finally confessed. She had joined Master Long's special class and managed to trade her rewards for that technique for him. That set off an alarm in the hero's mind. He knew that kind of trade between students was forbidden and came with harsh punishment, but the girl just bumped into him playfully and, finger to her lips, sealed the pact. The secret would die with them. Luo frowned in disapproval, but listened on. Shin said she was now part of the student council and at the school was preparing a huge party for a badass senior returning from an internship. She tried to drag the hero along, but he refused right away. He hated crowds. Even so, she didn't give up on wearing him down. After the talk, each went their own way. Luo and his big friend were in deep sleep when the peace was shattered. An emergency alert blasted through the loudspeakers, making even the chubby guy jump out of bed in shock. They only had 3 minutes to report to the training field. The two threw on their coats in a flash and sprinted for the exit. When they arrived, the rest of the class and the instructor were already there, wearing grim expressions. Time was up. The order was blunt. Anyone who was late would take a heavy credit penalty. Those with 0 points would see their next rewards erased. The students who arrived late tried to complain, claiming the time was too short, but the instructor had no patience for excuses. He issued an ultimatum. Anyone who opened their mouth to disrupt the class would immediately lose another 20 points. Silence fell instantly. The final message was clear. Anyone who completed the mission on time would leave with pockets full of credits and rewards. The hunt had begun. The big guy liked the instructor's heavy hand and leaned over to whisper approval to Luo. The teacher shouted for silence and dropped the bomb. An emergency call had reported civilians cornered by bizarre beasts, and their team had been assigned to eliminate them. One of the students thought Master Han was joking. After all, they were freshmen with only a month of training, most still at basic level. The instructor knew the challenge was insane and the mission far from easy, but he didn't back down. He laid it out plainly. To reach the top, you have to face the abyss. The redhead got straight to the point. He wanted an elite squad, not a pack of cowards. He had already chosen the leader, Song Jae, a guy already at level B with strong abilities. The man with glasses accepted the responsibility with irritating confidence, adjusting his frames. Lo stared at the chosen leader, and a bitter memory hit like a punch. It was Yahia's boyfriend. Seeing that romantic glued to the girl who had humiliated him left a taste of bile in his mouth. Lo's friend, trying to lighten the mood, joked that he shouldn't get discouraged, that love would come back someday. The hero shut him up instantly. Even the chubby guy was mesmerized by Yahia's beauty, but the trance broke when the mentor shouted the final warning. They had only 10 minutes before the city defenses closed. Anyone left outside would lose the mission and earn a punishment on top of it. The kids didn't wait for a second warning and took off, doubling their running pace. Before long, the silence of the night swallowed the group as they advanced through the ruins of the dead city. Suddenly, a rock fell from above. Lo, his friend, and the girlfriend instantly went into guard mode, backs pressed together. The trio was the first to sense the danger. A massive monster was crouched on the ceiling, watching its prey. It was a thundercat cub, a beast related to the cheetah, but thirsty for blood. The chubby guy, eager to prove himself, wasn't intimidated. Since the creature was only level C, he decided it was time to turn the beast into a barbecue.
No one was surprised by the big guy's attitude. He was always the first to jump straight into danger. With a precise leap, he closed the distance and unleashed a brutal strike. The giant cat was sent flying by the impact, but the beast was no pushover. The moment it landed on its feet, it spread its jaws wide and fired a glowing energy sphere straight at them. The energy blast skimmed past the big guy's face. He nearly got his head taken off. Seeing the damage that small creature could cause, his legs started to wobble. Like any cheetah-type beast, it was a blur of speed and raw strength. 1 second of distraction was all it took for the tables to turn on him. With no time to react or counterattack, he felt the furry monster leap straight onto his chest. Acting purely on instinct, he managed to shove it away and dodge, but the creature gave him no breathing room and kept chasing him, foaming with rage. Yao watched it all up close, impressed by the guy's chest. She even tried to step in, but her boyfriend blocked her path. As leader, the guy with glasses gave a twisted order: let the big guy wear himself out. The strategy was cruel. Use the student as bait to drain the beast's energy and make the final kill easier. Lo was stunned by just how cold that man was. The big guy, exhausted and too stubborn to beg, collapsed to his knees and covered his head with his hands, bracing for the worst. He took a beating. The beast whipped its tail and went in for the finishing blow. When the sharp claws sliced through the air, panic hit hard, and the big guy bolted, screaming for help.
Out of nowhere, the blonde had had enough of that cowardice and jumped into the fight. Her eyes were pure fire now. She was determined to crush the monster. The beast charged in without fear, but the girl was deadlier. With a sharp punch to the creature's forehead, she shattered its horn. The Thundercat staggered back, howling in pain and clutching the wound with its paw. But the beast was tough, and once the shock passed, it braced itself for an all-out counterattack. The blonde's friend panicked, thinking she wouldn't be able to handle it, and the rest of the team shouted warnings for her to be careful. The tension exploded. The beast fired its energy blasts at the girl, but she didn't even blink. She looked like she was enjoying the danger. In a violent burst, she leapt as high as she could, her plan already set. She focused every ounce of energy into her right leg. With a masterful kick, she sent the energy sphere flying into the stratosphere. The moment she hit the ground, Jiao rolled backward, and without giving the beast a second to breathe, advanced in silence. She appeared out of nowhere and delivered a brutal kick to the creature's jaw. The giant cat collapsed and didn't move again. The blonde flashed a victorious smile. It was her first elite kill. The kids were ecstatic over the heroic scene. Everyone except our hero, who stayed quiet. Jael's friend was practically drooling with pride. After all, she had just unleashed over 500% genetic strength in that final blow. Her friend didn't waste time and hyped her up, calling her a prodigy and incredibly talented. The praise sounded like music to the blonde's ears, and she started acting like she was the best thing ever. She locked eyes with our hero, convinced that Sango was still infinitely superior since he had plenty of resources and didn't rely on scraps like herbs or crystals. To her, Jiao would never even come close to him. She jumped straight into her boyfriend's arms, and he welcomed her with a huge grin. But the guy with glasses wasn't stupid. He noticed the way she kept looking at her ex. Jealousy hit hard. Sensing the tension, Jaya quickly calmed him down, holding his hand and assuring him that Jaya was just a nobody who couldn't compare to him and wasn't worth his attention. She shot the hero a deadly look, as if warning him to stay in his place or she'd wipe him out herself without hesitation. The blonde went over to the beast's carcass, but got unlucky. There wasn't a single blood crystal left. Soon after, the group tucked themselves into a quiet corner to catch their breath. The captain told the girl to start a fire, but she pushed back. She warned that she'd read that lighting a fire in the wild was basically asking to be eaten, since the light attracts all kinds of abominations. The guy with glasses sighed, fed up, and told everyone to relax. He claimed he'd set traps all around the perimeter and that nothing would slip by unnoticed. The explanation didn't convince the girl, who knew very well that some beasts were so fast and stealthy, they made those traps look like children's toys.
Offended that his leadership was being questioned, the rich city boy gave a mocking ultimatum, offering her command if she thought she knew better. Meanwhile, Luo and the big guy just watched the circus from a distance. The big guy whispered that the man was way too arrogant and couldn't stand being challenged. Luo, staying calm, reminded him that the guy was the commander and that for now they had to follow orders, but he promised they'd watch each other's backs through the night. Eventually, they lit the fire and everyone relaxed. Then Song approached Luo with a smooth tone, pretending they were close. He wanted a favor. The blonde, suspicious, asked what he was after. Four Eyes explained that even with the traps, he needed a sucker to stand watch and prevent surprises. Luo saw through the ploy immediately, but agreed to take the first shift, with the big guy promising to relieve him after a few hours of sleep. That was when Song decided to poke the wound. Mockingly, he said he couldn't believe that someone so talented like Luo needed help with something as stupid as staying awake. The hero just held his gaze in silence. The big guy tried to ease things, saying 4 hours of sleep was the bare minimum for anyone to function, but that only made the captain angrier. Now Song wanted Luo to stay awake the entire night, without rest. The tension spiked, and he was about to go after the hero, but Luo stopped him. To keep things from turning bloody right there, the protagonist accepted the humiliation and agreed to guard the camp alone. The captain stepped closer with a mocking grin, dripping venom as he warned the hero not to fall asleep. The bastard even threatened him. If anyone died, he would make sure to screw Luo over at school, reporting that he had abandoned his post. The night swallowed the camp, and the silence of cowards ruled as most of them passed out. Cardboard was spread on the ground, and Jaja snuggled up next to her rich boyfriend. Luo kept his word and stayed on watch, fighting the weight of his eyelids. He stared into the darkness of the forest, where only the chirping of crickets and the occasional swoop of bats could be heard. Out of nowhere, the big guy showed up looking half asleep, brushing dust off a rock to sit beside him. Luo told him to get lost and go rest, but the big guy insisted. The friend had deep dark circles under his eyes and claimed he couldn't sleep even in his own bed, saying he was already drained as he let out a yawn that nearly dislocated his jaw. But the mood shifted in an instant. Luo sensed danger and immediately clamped a hand over the big guy's mouth. The silence grew heavy, suffocating. Luo ordered him to pay attention to every sound. Nervous, the big guy scanned the horizon, but all he could hear was the crackling of the firewood. Luo, with his senses sharpened to 700%, picked up a sound no one else could. For a second, he thought exhaustion was messing with his head, but the tension in his body said otherwise. Luo crouched, on full alert. Suddenly, the noise grew so loud that even the big guy realized something was wrong. Beasts emerged out of nowhere, surrounding the camp. They were smaller than the previous monster, but they came in packs and thirsty for blood. They slid through the tall grass, producing a sinister whisper, before one of them breached the perimeter and let out a soul-chilling howl.
The group woke up in shock at the roar, confused and rubbing their eyes, unable to grasp the apocalypse that had begun. The creatures had already chosen their targets. The students, still groggy from sleep, reacted like headless chickens. Some, overwhelmed by fear, bolted before the fight even started. Lo was the only one who didn't hesitate. He charged forward and hurled the first beast away with a precise strike. The creature hit the ground, but recovered in the blink of an eye and lunged straight for the hero's neck. With inhuman agility, the boy leapt aside, escaping a fatal blow by inches. It was clear to everyone then, the camping trip was over. It was kill or be killed. The blonde took a step back, judging the distance and locking eyes with the opponent already charging at him, drooling. Lo didn't waste time. He grabbed the beast by the leg and threw it over his shoulder before it could even scratch his skin. Shin was already in combat mode as well. Addicted to using her legs, she unleashed a brutal flying kick that smashed straight into the lynx's head. Yahya didn't hold back either, firing off a barrage of punches and dropping several beasts with her fists. For a moment, chaos gave way to a tense silence. The students scanned the perimeter, sensing that the worst was yet to come. They were right. A colossal beast appeared on higher ground, its fur glowing with a threatening sheen. The weaker students fell into total panic. The moment the monster jumped, the rout began. The cowards only wanted to save their own skin. The creature let out a demonic hiss, and in an instant, its fur transformed into thousands of razor-sharp spikes. The girls crouched to avoid the rain of shards, but the slower students were slaughtered. Even with orders to fight as a group, panic froze them in place. Unlike Yahya's friend, who swallowed her fear, drew her knives and charged in, ready to sacrifice herself to prevent a total massacre. The big guy didn't stay out of it either. He pulled his weapon and spoke plainly. Anyone who hid would die like a rat. It was time to act like men. The fight was so violent that the crashes echoed through the entire forest. Yahia's ally, her eyes burning with rage, was at her limit and begged Song to step in. She was exhausted and wouldn't survive another round without the captain's support. Beside her, another classmate also cried for help, seeing that the victims had no chance on their own. But the guy with glasses showed his true, rotten nature. He refused to help, wanting the King of Lynxes to leave everyone on the brink of death. The plan was sick. He would only step in at the last second, pose as the savior, and reap all the prestige. Lo, crouched in a strategic position above the monster, coldly analyzed every detail of the beast. He noticed an old scar on its leg, a detail that sparked a lethal strategy. Meanwhile, the blue-haired girl fought for her life against the enraged creature, which kept firing spikes non-stop. Exhausted, she could only cover her face to avoid being shredded. As she retreated, she tripped over the carcass of a dead beast and lost her balance. Sensing the advantage, the monster spread its claws with sadistic pleasure. The girl fell onto her back, defenseless, staring death in the face. The beast leapt with its jaws wide open. All she could do was let out a desperate scream, praying for a miracle before being torn apart by its fangs. The creature didn't expect anyone to break through with such fury. Luo appeared out of nowhere and clamped the beast's lower jaw with his bare hands. The hero pushed himself to the limit and unleashed a brutal flurry of blows, shattering the monster's bones in seconds. He wasn't about to leave the girl to her fate. He planted himself in front of her like a human shield. When she finally stopped hyperventilating and opened her eyes, she found herself face to face with her savior. Before she could say a word, Luo spoke bluntly, telling her to stay sharp and watch her footing next time. With her voice trembling, she thanked him, but the relief didn't last long. The beast was still breathing and preparing for another strike. The captain watched it all with barely contained hatred. It was obvious that Luo's audacity in saving the day was ruining his plan to play the hero, and that drove him mad. In the middle of the tension, one of the students shouted for everyone to look at the King of Lynxes. The creature was undergoing a bizarre mutation, engulfed in flames and changing shape right before their eyes. Seeing the abomination evolve, the big guy panicked completely. He screamed at Luo to run while he still could, but the hero didn't budge. The protagonist stood his ground, staring down the stubborn cruelty of fate. Shaking like a leaf, the big guy tried to drag his friend away, but Luo's resolve was rock solid. The other students watched in shock, some even believing he might handle it alone. The girl who had been saved was terrified, convinced he was walking into suicide, but Luo's friend stepped in to calm everyone down. He dropped the bombshell. Luo was now level B and carried an absurd 700% genetic strength. Hearing about that insane power in a boy who looked so ordinary nearly made everyone stagger. Curiosity took over, but fear still ruled. It was as if no one remembered the lessons about warrior gods. The difference between a common soldier and a legend was exactly what Luo was about to prove. Ordinary warriors are easy prey for beasts of the same level. Shin joined in and delivered her verdict. Not even the god of warriors could take down an aberration like that without bleeding for it. In her eyes, the only logical move was to run while they still could. Song, the coward, watched from the sidelines and began to realize he had underestimated the hero. He still thought Luo was an idiot for attempting the impossible, but he didn't abandon his dirty plan. He was still hoping everyone would be pushed to the brink of death so he could step in as the savior and steal all the glory. Meanwhile, the King of Lynxes caught its breath and moved in for the real massacre.
The beast summoned a massive, blazing whirlwind and hurled it at the group. The big guy froze. His legs trembled when he realized it wasn't just wind, but a tornado of destructive fire. No one had expected an apocalypse like that. Even the short-haired girl stepped back in shock. She knew entering that inferno was a death sentence, even for the elite. If Luo got caught, it would be the end. The vortex kept growing, more ferocious by the second, yet the hero didn't show a hint of fear. He slipped between the attacks with absurd skill, coming out unscathed from those pathetic attempts to bring him down. The Four Eyes watched in disbelief. He had never seen a technique like that. It was completely off the radar. As Luo dodged lightning and flames, a final plan took shape in his mind. He needed to break his own limits. He locked eyes with the King of Lynxes, and instead of fear, flashed a confident smile, like someone who had already won.
With a masterful move, Luo drove a devastating punch into the monster's face. Dust exploded and hid the damage, but soon everyone saw the beast's body being hurled away. Without giving it time to react, Luo rushed forward, grabbed the king by the tail, and slammed it into the ground with all his strength. The impact was decisive. The beast didn't twitch again. The students erupted in excitement. The boy everyone thought was fragile had just saved them all. Smiles of relief appeared, and the funeral-like atmosphere vanished from the battlefield. They felt renewed by his courage. The only one scowling was Song Jae. He adjusted his glasses, seething with rage at being overshadowed. The red-eyed girl, unaware of the captain's venom, thanked Luo with a radiant smile. Yahya watched from afar, and Song didn't like seeing the hero draw all the attention, including hers. The big guy finally snapped at the captain. Brushing dirt off his clothes, he stormed up to the Four Eyes demanding answers. How dare he stand by with his arms crossed while they nearly died? Luo, keeping his composure, held his friend back and told him to calm down, sarcastically suggesting the shameless guy must have had his reasons. But the big guy wouldn't swallow that. What excuse justified letting allies die? To him, Song wasn't worthy of being called a warrior, much less a leader. Outrage spread. It was unacceptable for a commander to betray his team like that. The big guy's words swayed the group, and students began to glare at Song. His behavior was simply disgusting. Cornered, the guy with glasses tried the most cynical escape possible. He adjusted his glasses and claimed he was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Worse, he tried to flip the blame onto Luo, suggesting the hero was the one who wanted people to die by stepping in too early. A blatant lie. The big guy shot back, reminding everyone that without Luo, the camp would be a graveyard. He dealt a blow to the captain's ego, stating a mediocre warrior like Song would never handle the Lynx King alone. Right there, he proposed removing the commander and putting Luo in charge. Most of the students agreed instantly.
Seeing his power crumble, Song began threatening anyone who dared vote against him, promising to make their lives hell in the future. Even with fear hanging in the air, the blue-haired girl was the first to back the new leader. Still, some cowards hesitated, afraid of retaliation from the rich kid's family. The big guy looked at those spineless students with disgust. Song, a master manipulator, spotted the opening and started buying loyalty. He promised rare herbs and guaranteed jobs with fat salaries at his family's company after graduation. The opportunists took the bait immediately, and the slick rich kid forced his way back into command of the mission. While dirty politics ran rampant, Luo ignored the circus and walked over to the Lynx King's corpse. After digging through the carcass, he finally found what he was looking for, the blood crystal. His friend came closer and whispered that the item was a relic. A crystal like that was worth more than months of brutal training and was incredibly rare. Both of them stared at the stone, mesmerized. Luo examined the gem carefully. The verdict was impressive. The crystal granted about 50% extra resistance. It was the kind of defensive upgrade any warrior would kill for. The big guy was annoyed since he had hoped for an attack bonus, but Luo didn't waste time. He spun the crystal in his hand and swallowed it in one go. The instant it went down, his body felt like it was floating, light as a feather. The sensation didn't last long, but the impact was real. Luo pulled out the tablet to check the data and was shocked. The experimental drug he had injected earlier didn't just boost his DNA, it turned his body into a processing machine. He could extract far more power from every crystal or herb than any other warrior. The defense upgrade was massive. The group was already moving out, and the big guy called for him not to lag behind. The final objective was right ahead. A sinister building, completely sealed, with no visible doors or windows. Inside, civilians were trapped with no way to call for help since the communications satellite had been destroyed. On the way, Luo's phone buzzed with an urgent alert from the academy. The map showed a war zone. The city was infested with cyclopses and their nests. Red dots on the radar marked beasts detected by satellite. The order was clear. Total silence, or they would be torn apart before getting close. The big guy's curiosity outweighed his fear. He peeked out of their hiding spot and almost fell backward. The roof of the neighboring building was packed with cyclopses, split into small groups just waiting for movement. Yahya, feeling the weight of the situation, suggested retreating. The group was far too small for that army.
Her friend agreed, convinced that calling for reinforcements was the only way out alive. That was when Song, the Four Eyes, showed up with his usual arrogant tone. He mocked the girl's fear, saying those creatures barely reached 100% genetic potential. He already had a strategy planned, and of course took a jab at Luo, claiming that calling for help would be too easy for someone trying to prove himself.
He gathered everyone and laid out the plan. Since the east and north were less crowded, the team would split into 3 fronts. One group would handle the civilian rescue, the second would act as bait to draw chaos, and the third would stay in the rear for first aid. They would breach from the north and retreat through the east. For the first time, Luo had to admit it. The bastard's plan made sense. Luo glanced over the plan and nodded. The strategy was solid. The slick guy with glasses didn't waste time and assigned himself and his girlfriend to the first team, leaving Wang Wucheng and the rear group in the third. But the big guy wasn't stupid and smelled a setup. He spoke up immediately, asking if that meant Luo would be the only bait in the second team, distracting the monsters alone. Silence fell. Everyone saw how messed up that division was and waited for Song's excuse. The captain, cynical as ever, said fewer people were better for drawing attention, reducing the risk of a total massacre. He stepped closer to the hero and patted his shoulder, pretending to trust his potential. Luo didn't flinch. He accepted the suicide mission calmly and moved on. Meanwhile, the city was crawling with aberrations. There wasn't a single corner free of cyclopses. One of them, lounging on a rock, was so distracted it didn't even sense the approach. Luo appeared like a shadow, clamped the beast's jaw and the top of its head, and twisted violently to the side. The monster barely had time to widen its eyes before its neck snapped, and it dropped for good. With the path cleared, the group advanced toward the massive building where the civilians were trapped. They searched carefully, but the scene was pure horror. On every floor, packs of cyclopses were devouring human flesh non-stop. Yahia froze. It was impossible to pass through without becoming dinner. To make things worse, they realized other beasts were already closing in from behind. Retreat was no longer an option. Luo gave the order. They would go up no matter what. The group thought he had lost his mind since the civilians were at the top, but there was no other way. He convinced them to use the building's blind spots to rest and climb cautiously. They scaled the neighboring structure and began rappelling down with ropes one by one, using the wall's irregularities to avoid falling. It was masterful work. Luo launched himself toward the top floor window and shattered the glass with a precise kick. Inside, panic exploded. People huddled into corners, convinced it was the end. The blonde ordered absolute silence and said they were university students on a rescue mission. Desperation turned into tears of relief. A mother hugged her child tightly, unable to believe the miracle had arrived. After so long in hell, heroes had finally come to save them. The relief didn't last long. An elderly man in the group asked suspiciously if the kid had come alone to rescue them. He was blunt. Luo looked far too young, and the mission was suicidal. The old man suggested calling for reinforcements, but he didn't see a trace of fear on the hero's face. Luo assured him that support was on the way and that people were waiting outside. Moments later, Song, Yadya, and the other girl entered through the window. The captain with glasses came in wearing that same look of disgust, grumbling at how many people they would have to carry. The old man, head lowered, delivered the grim truth. There had been dozens at first, but the monsters had picked them off one by one. They had only survived because the defense system held out until it finally failed. The old man explained, shaking with fear, that the Cyclopses treated humans like stockpiled fresh meat. The desperation was obvious. Song let out a heavy sigh, already showing he didn't care about anyone there. His assistant backed up the obvious point. Facing that pack of monsters head-on would be a massacre. Cyclopses were brutal, mutant gorillas that hunted in groups and left no openings. That's when the captain dropped his sick proposal. He said the only way was sacrifice. He wanted to save only those who were strong and healthy, leaving the rest behind to die.
Luo stared at him and asked what would happen to the others. Cold as ice, the slicked-haired guys said they'd have to fend for themselves. All hell broke loose. The victims panicked, unable to believe that these so-called warriors were about to abandon them in hell. Some dropped to their knees in front of Luo, begging for mercy. The hero told everyone to shut up to avoid drawing the monsters and confronted the commander, saying he wouldn't follow such a cowardly order. Even the red-eyed girl snapped, saying this was pure cruelty and that they were human beings, not trash. Annoyed at being challenged, Song demanded to know what they suggested instead. The girl stood her ground and demanded reinforcements, but the captain shouted in her face, reminding her that the school would take a full day to arrive, and by then everyone would be monster crap. He tried to shut her down by threatening her for disobedience. Even so, she ignored him and told the people to follow her, giving them a thin thread of hope. Song's fury only grew. He gave an ultimatum. They could only take one person. He pointed at a baby and said the child was too small and would only slow them down. Hearing that, the baby burst into tears and clung desperately to his father. But the monster in glasses didn't care. He wasn't changing his mind over crying. The captain insisted that only one would leave. Luo took a deep breath and laid it out straight. The plan was to split up, take the first group now, then come back for the rest. Simple. But Song, stubborn as ever, started arguing again. He claimed that ordinary people gave off a scent the beasts could detect from far away, and that they didn't have enough disguise potions for everyone. But the hero already had his move planned. He said he would give them his own potion. Luo explained they would make as many trips as necessary until the building was cleared. The blonde walked over to the family with the baby and handed them the vial, explaining that the liquid was made from Cyclops blood and masked all human traces. The old man was impressed, saying that was the act of a true warrior.
Luo's friend froze. She knew that without the potion, he would become a walking target among the monsters. But the hero didn't hesitate. He said he knew exactly what he was getting into. Seeing his courage, she stepped in as well, handing over her own potion and promising to stay behind to provide support. Song, realizing he'd lost the argument, went to the window with Shin and muttered that it was time to get moving. The old man shook Luo's hand, overflowing with gratitude. With a serious look, Luo said he was just doing his part. The grandfather smiled, certain he had found a rare soul. The first group left, and Luo sat down to wait his turn, feeling the adrenaline rise. He thought about how this was the beginning of an era. He remembered reading that A-rank warriors had 2,000% genetic strength and could hear even an ant moving. That was the peak he wanted to reach. Out of nowhere, the girlfriend approached him, a little awkward, asking what was going through his mind. Luo cut her off sharply, saying it was personal. The red-eyed girl looked hurt. The mood turned heavy. She lowered her head, hiding her face, and apologized for all the stupid things she had said earlier, thanking him from the bottom of her heart for saving her life. The emotional moment was cut short by a strange noise coming from the ceiling. The group and the commander came running back, with Song wearing the same shitty expression as always. The big guy spotted Luo and sprinted toward him like there was no tomorrow. He sat down beside him. When he heard that the hero needed help, Luo laughed. If even the baby had made it out unharmed, nothing in the world was taking him down. The group was in high spirits until Song showed up and ruined it, barking orders at Huang Xuan to move and get the people to the safe point. The brown-eyed guy snorted in anger, but swallowed it and got to work. The big guy threw the girl over his back, told her to hold on tight, and started descending the building with an agility no one expected. Luo and his teammates stayed behind, waiting for the right moment. A few seconds later, Song returned, out of breath, saying this was the final run. He handed out some reinforcement vials, and with that annoying command tone, ordered everyone to split up. Even with their scent masked, the Cyclops had sharp eyes, and any mistake would be fatal. It was Luo's turn. He hoisted the old man onto his back, and the grandfather, already resigned to the worst, asked them to leave him behind if the monsters attacked. Luo ignored it and promised he would make it out alive. While the others climbed slowly, terrified, the hero decided that slow wasn't his style.
Luo leapt from an absurd height to speed things up. The old man nearly had a heart attack, and Song was completely stunned, eyes almost popping out of his head. The kid was flying. At the last second, he grabbed the building wall with one hand to break the fall and landed smoothly on the ground. Watching it all, the man in glasses felt a chill run down his spine. He realized the student was monstrously strong. Fear took hold of the captain. He knew that if he didn't get rid of Luo now, he'd never be able to face him later.
Luo landed, set the old man down, and immediately sensed something was wrong. Instead of heading to the rendezvous point, the commander was moving straight toward the Cyclops' nest. The hero stayed alert, but first escorted the grandfather to safety, trying to calm him as he continued to tremble. Everything seemed under control until a gigantic shadow rose on the horizon and the atmosphere turned heavy. It looked like a gorilla ripped straight out of a nightmare, radiating crushing pressure. A chill ran down Luo's spine as he instantly recognized the threat, the ferocious Monkey King. The beast had bloodlust in its eyes and was far more aggressive than usual. Luo began to suspect that the filthy creature hadn't shown up there by chance. The Monkey King was hot on Song's trail, who was screaming like a madman, begging for help. Luo didn't care. He had a bigger mission. He picked up the pace, warning the old man that he was about to step on the gas and push his speed to another level. With an explosive leap, he gained altitude, unaware of the devilish grin spreading across the man with glasses' face. That bastard Song had managed to spray an estrogen solution on Luo without him noticing. The trap was lethal. That scent was like a beacon to the Monkey King, who would chase the target to hell if needed. The slick-haired guy couldn't swallow the insult and wanted to see the hero sprawled on the ground. To him, the only acceptable revenge was death. Luo began to feel the strain. Running with an old man on his back while a giant gorilla hunts you isn't something just anyone can do. Lost and unsure where to flee, he struggled to access the system. The city map lit up on the screen and he started plotting a desperate escape route. Song followed closely behind, tracking every move, breathing hard but determined to witness his rival's end. Checking the radar, Luo was heading straight for the glacial basin, a true killing ground. The villain's plan was to lure the beast there and let the cold and the monkey do the dirty work. To protect himself, Song drenched himself in an androgenic solution to cancel out his scent and moved quietly. They reached the glacial basin, a bizarre place where environmental pressure hit 800%. Luckily for Luo, his genetic resistance was at the same level, allowing him to adapt without pain. The old man wasn't so fortunate. His body gave out and he passed out cold. Worried, the hero laid the old man on a rock and tried to wake him, but only an energy stimulant did the trick. The old man came to, thanking him for saving his life again, and Luo swore he would get them both alive. Suddenly, Song's voice echoed across the ice, calling out to him. The cold there was brutal, but Luo was shielded by his crystals and herbs. The real problem, however, hadn't backed off. The colossal gorilla was still charging straight at them. The female pheromones were doing their dirty work, and the Monkey King came drooling, unstoppable. Hidden, Luo studied the beast. It was radiating heat in a frozen environment, which meant its thermal resistance was being pushed to the limit. Could it be taken down? The Four Eyes started laughing, thinking the hero would beg for help, but Luo made it clear he was going to face the monster alone. Song couldn't believe what he heard and decided to drop the act. With a cynical smile, he admitted that he had sprayed estrogen on Luo. The plan was twisted. The monkey didn't normally attack humans, but it turned demonic when it detected that scent. Luo realized the trap too late. When he tried to move to save the old man, the captain blocked his path, laughing at his misery. In a swift motion, Song grabbed the hero and hurled him into a block of ice under the terrified gaze of the grandfather. The villain felt on top of the world, convinced that Luo didn't even have 400% genetic strength.
The blonde couldn't believe the guy was willing to break school rules just to kill him. The slick-haired bastard mocked him, saying that since they were classmates, he'd never dirty his hands. But if the Monkey King did the job, no one at the university would suspect a thing. Luo felt his blood boil with rage at such rot. The bastard jumped back, laughing like a lunatic, ready to enjoy the show. But karma is fast. Suddenly, a massive shadow blocked out the sun. Song looked up and panic locked his throat. The Monkey King was coming down with a colossal club aimed straight at him. The impact shattered the ice ledge where the villain stood. By some miracle, he leapt aside and avoided being crushed, but the shock was overwhelming. Without mercy, the gorilla swung again, landing a devastating blow squarely on Song. The kid was sent flying and slammed into frozen rocks. Dazed and coughing up blood, the captain couldn't understand why the monster had chosen him as a target when the female scent was on Luo. The hero simply watched with his arms crossed, laughing at the traitor. Luo spoke plainly. Song was a backstabbing piece of trash who had been scheming since day one, but the spell had backfired on the caster. Song had planned every step of that filthy ambush. He sprayed the product on Luo, isolated him from the group, and did everything he could to turn him into monster food. What the slick-haired bastard didn't expect was that the hero had already figured everything out and was just waiting for the right moment to return the favor. Desperate, the Four Eyes demanded to know how Luo could predict the beast's movements, but the blonde just laughed. There was one detail the captain had overlooked: monkey biology. The creature became completely confused by the mix of scents and hair colors, and the villain's master plan collapsed in spectacular failure. As Song struggled to process his mistake, a massive stone slammed him into the ice. Luo made it clear. Now he was going to enjoy watching the traitor face the Monkey King's fury, something ordinary people don't get the pleasure of seeing. The captain tried to run, but the hero was faster, driving a clean punch into his chest and knocking him back to the ground, straight into the beast's grasp. Song finally realized he had been outplayed. Luo was far stronger, and the hostile environment didn't affect him at all. The captain had dug his own grave and now had nowhere to run. The monkey grabbed him by the leg and whipped him against an ice block. Too weak to resist, the villain watched as his clothes tear apart as he tried in vain to escape the beast's brutal grip.
The scene was so brutal that even Luo was caught off guard by the level of carnage. The old man, in total shock, had never witnessed something so cruel, yet he felt no pity. He assured Luo that if the Academy asked any questions, he would testify in the hero's favor, since Song had a rotten heart and had brought about his own end. Luo thanked him with a smile. But the traitor still had fuel left to burn. With one last surge of adrenaline, Song managed to retaliate and unleashed a violent strike into the monkey's stomach. The blow was so powerful that the beast was sent flying, crashing hard against the frozen rocks. The Monkey King's roar echoed across the ice, putting Luo on high alert. When the dust settled, the scene was tense. The gorilla had a massive hole in its abdomen and was howling in pain. On the other side, the Four Eyes struggled to steady himself, breathing heavily, eyes locked on Luo, ready for a final showdown. Sensing what had happened, the old man warned that Song had resorted to an illegal genetic enhancement potion. Luo asked what it was, and the old man explained that it was a heavy drug from a pharmaceutical company, capable of pushing strength and endurance to the limit. The problem was the price. The effect lasted only 30 minutes, and the side effects could permanently destroy the user's body. Song didn't care. All he wanted was to see Luo's blood spilled on the ice. The Monkey King, even wounded, refused to retreat, but the captain, fueled by the drug, had become a demon. He charged the beast with blind fury, and with a single brutal blow shattered one of the gorilla's limbs. The creature screamed in agony, shaking the glaciers. Acting on pure survival instinct, the monkey grabbed Song by the shoulder and slammed him into the ground, but the rich kid countered with a savage kick to the jaw, knocking teeth out of the beast's mouth. Watching the fight, Luo realized the monster was about to lose. That wouldn't do. Why not give it a little push, he thought, a crooked smile forming on his face. He began hurling stones with surgical precision at Song's feet, hitting exactly where he needed solid footing.
The captain lost it. Every time he tried to land a decisive move, a rock smashed into his shin or bare foot, throwing him off balance. The monkey took advantage of every opening to unleash more punishment, but it still wasn't enough to finish the traitor. Song locked eyes with Luo, hatred overflowing as he realized he was being sabotaged at the worst possible moment. Luo just laughed and tossed out a casual, "My bad, wrong target," while continuing the barrage. Now chunks of ice were flying straight at Song's face, blinding him in the middle of the battlefield. Luo kept his distance, openly mocking him, calling him a loser. The plan worked. Song lost his footing and collapsed onto the ice. Helpless, he watched the Monkey King's shadow loom over him for the final blow. Even broken and beaten, the bastard tried to crawl forward, struggling against the fate he had created with his own hands. Song's last strike was monstrous. He pierced straight through the beast's body in a horrifying way. He paused briefly to catch his breath, then slowly turned his neck toward Luo, a twisted smile stretching across his face. He believed it was finally the hero's turn to become a statistic.
Lo watched him approach with arrogant swagger and, with his usual sarcasm, told him to calm down and talk like a normal person, saying that fighting was a waste of time. But the Four Eyes had no interest in talking. He lunged forward with murder in his eyes, ready to smash Lo's face. Then his body froze mid-step. The poison from the potion finally demanded its price, and his strength drained away in an instant. Just as the old man had warned, the backlash hit like a freight train. Song collapsed onto the ice, screaming in agony as his body was torn apart from the inside. Lo simply sat down nearby and mocked the pathetic assassination attempt. The spoiled brat was losing his mind from pain, but couldn't even move his tongue to curse. Victorious, the blonde went to collect the spoils. He searched the monkey's corpse and cleaned it out, finding a rare green shell and an extremely valuable carapace, items worth a fortune on the black market. But the real prize came after. Lo discovered another blood crystal, a treasure that boosted strength and even carried a chance to awaken the fire gene, a luxury item that warriors paid obscene prices for. While he inspected the loot, reinforcements finally arrived. The big guy was the first to reach him, nearly having a heart attack from worry, demanding to know if his friend was okay. Yaja and the others stood frozen, staring at the battlefield, until her gaze fell on Song, sprawled on the ground and covered by an expensive fur coat that Lo had tossed over him out of sheer mockery. She couldn't understand how the perfect boyfriend had been reduced to that miserable wreck. Professor Han arrived soon after. He explained that the mission's difficulty had suddenly jumped in rank, and when he heard Lo was in danger, he had run the entire way to rescue him. But upon seeing that the hero had already handled everything alone, the master didn't get upset. He simply ordered everyone to leave immediately, since the area was crawling with high-level beasts. A heavy silence settled as everyone stared at Song's ruined state beneath the coat. Yaja looked from her boyfriend to Lo, who was laughing with the big guy, completely unharmed. Back at the academy, things escalated quickly. The administration called an emergency meeting and admitted they had made a serious mistake, sending students into a monster nest they had no business facing. 5 students returned in body bags, and the red-haired professor took full responsibility. The mood was grim, but the master tried to lift their spirits, praising their efforts and promising that the reward would be worth it. When they asked what the prize was, he gave the number. 200,000 yuan deposited into each student's account, along with an upgrade to their loan limits. To top it all off, leave was officially granted. Vacation at last.